All right, let's talk about one of the most fundamental pieces of Azure security, network security groups, or NSGs for short. You see, once your app is up and running in the cloud, you've got to answer a really big question.
And that question is, who gets in? I mean, seriously, you've built this amazing thing, it's live in Azure, but who's allowed to even knock on the door? Who gets past that velvet rope, and who gets turned away? That's exactly what we're going to break down.
So here's the plan. First, we'll meet our digital bouncer. Then, we'll peek at its guest list, the security rules. We'll figure out how it decides who to check first, look at the default house rules, and wrap up with some awesome tips to make your life way easier.
Okay, so let's start with the big idea. The absolute best way to picture a network security group is to think of it like a digital bouncer. You know, a super meticulous security guard standing at the door of your virtual network. This is your first line of defense, and its only job is to decide who gets in and who stays out.
Now, if we're being a little more formal, an NSG is basically a traffic filter. It's got a list of rules, and it looks at every single piece of data trying to get in or out of your stuff, like your virtual machines. And its job is dead simple. Check the list, then either allow or deny. That's it.
So, how does our bouncer actually know who to let in? Well, it's not just making it up as it goes. It has a guest list. Or maybe a better word is a rule book. And every single rule on that list is a super specific instruction that tells the NSG exactly what to do when it sees a certain kind of traffic.
And when I say precise, I mean incredibly precise. Each rule is made up of 7 key parts, 7 properties that you get to define. Put them all together, and you get one crystal clear instruction. So let's take a look at what makes up one of these rules. All right, this is the anatomy of a rule. First, you've got to give it a unique name. Then there's priority. And trust me, this one is so important. We're going to talk about it in a minute. Next, you define the who and where, the source and destination. What kind of traffic is it? That's the protocol. Is it coming or going? That's the direction. And you can get super specific with the port range. And finally, the big decision, action. Do we allow it or deny it? Those 7 things, that's your complete rule. Okay, so I mentioned priority is a big deal, right? Well, let's talk about why. It is, without a doubt, the most important property to get right. It's not just some random number. It tells our bouncer the exact order to read the rules in.
And here's the one thing you absolutely have to remember. Lower number means higher priority. It feels a little backward at first, but it's crucial. A rule with priority 100 gets checked way before a rule with priority 200. It gets to decide first.
And that scale goes all the way up to 4096. That's the absolute lowest priority you can have. A rule with a big number like that only gets looked at if nothing else. Nothing with a higher priority has already dealt with the traffic. Okay, so this is the real kicker. The moment, the very second a match is found, everything else stops. If some traffic comes in and it matches your rule at priority 200, the NSG does whatever that rule says, allow or deny, and it completely ignores everything after it. Rule 300, rule 1000, it doesn't matter. They never even get looked at. The first match wins. Period.
All right, so we know how the bouncer checks the list, but it has another trick up its sleeve. It has a memory. NSGs are what we call stateful, and that's just a techie way of saying they remember who they're talking to. They keep track of the connections that are already happening.
And here's why that is so cool. Let's say your virtual machine reaches out to a website. Your outbound rule says, yep, that's allowed. The NSG sees this and makes a little note of it. Now, when the website sends its response back, the NSG remembers the conversation and just lets the traffic right back in. You don't need a separate inbound rule for the reply. How awesome is that? It makes your life so much simpler.
Okay, but here's something interesting. Before you even create a single rule of your own, every NSG comes with a few built-in rules. Think of them as the house rules. They're there to give you a safe starting point, a security baseline right out of the box. So, let's look at the default inbound rules. First thing to notice, those huge priority numbers. Remember, big number means low priority. So by default, Azure lets stuff inside your own virtual network talk to each other. It also lets the Azure Load Balancer talk to your stuff. But then, look at that last one, deny all inbound. That's your safety net. If nothing else matches, it just denies everything. And it's pretty much the same story for the outbound rules. Traffic can move around inside the network, and by default, it's also allowed to go out to the internet. But just like before, there's a deny all outbound at the very end to catch anything else. It's a really sensible, secure by default setup. Now here's the most important part about these default rules.
You can't delete them. They're always there. But, and this is a big but, that doesn't mean you're stuck. You can override them. All you have to do is create a new rule with a higher priority, a lower number. So say you wanted to block all internet access. Just create a new deny rule with the priority of like 300. Since 300 is way lower than 65,001, your rule wins. The first match wins, remember?
Okay, so we've got the fundamentals down. Now let's level up and look at a few features that make all of this way more powerful and just easier to manage.
First up, something called augmented security rules. This is a lifesaver. Instead of making a rule for port 80 and then another one for port 443, you can just group them all into one single rule. It cleans up your rule list so much and just makes everything easier to read.
Next, we have service tags. These are amazing. Think of them like shortcuts that Microsoft manages for you. So instead of you having to figure out every single IP address for, say, Azure Storage, you just use the tag storage. And the best part? Microsoft keeps that list of IPs updated for you automatically. You don't have to worry about it.
And here's a fun fact. You've already seen these in action. Remember those default rules? Virtual network, Azure Load Balancer, Internet. Yep, those are all service tags. See, they're just powerful, simple shortcuts.
And finally, we have application security groups, or ASGs. And honestly, these are a total game changer. They let you stop thinking about IP addresses and start thinking about your actual application. So you can put all your web servers into a group called, say, Web Tier, and all your databases into Data Tier. Then your rule is just simple English. Allow traffic from Web Tier to Data Tier. It's beautiful. You add a new server, just tag it with the right group, and the rules just work. The security follows your app, not some static list of IPs.
So there you have it. That's the power of Azure Network Security Groups. They're your digital bouncers, with a rulebook that you and only you get to write. You have all the tools you need to control exactly who gets past that velvet rope. So now the only question is, what are you going to protect?